Welcome to Larry's Library. And that clip is probably the first video I ever shot for this channel. We shot that and it was in the early stages of planning out the channel and what we were going to do with it and how I was going to, what the format was going to be. I mean, I really, everything was up in the air. And we shot that, and that was supposed to be the opening sequence. And then I sort of chickened out and I never used it. And I just thought it was appropriate to finally use it in this video that I'm calling the Hobbit Connection. And this is something I've been wanting to do for a while. This is actually my second try at it. The first one, I really screwed the audio up and I made a lot of mistakes and I left a lot of things out and I had to go back and I tried to save it in the edit. Couldn't do it. So I finally trashed it and just started all over again. So I'm hoping take two is the one. But anyway, so this is, like I said, this is a video I've been wanting to make for a very long time because it's something that's really important to me. It's not comic book related. It may be a sort of comic book adjacent, but it's important to me and my library, so I thought it would be cool to make, and I think some of you might enjoy it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of my Tolkien works, the books, the movies I have, some of the props and tchotchkes I've collected, and we're going to go through all that one at a time, and I'll throw in some personal details and other things. So here we go. Just going to get right into it. I should probably start out by talking about pronunciation, because when I did a little research for this video, putting together my outline, I quickly learned, which I had already kind of knew, but I never really took the time to research to find out what the proper ones were. But I knew that I have been pronouncing, and I'm not alone, not at all, but I've been pronouncing a lot of the Tolkien words, names and places and things wrong for the better part of my entire life. So I'm going to try to pronounce them correctly as I have learned through this research throughout the video. Now, I may vacillate back and forth between the right pronunciation and the wrong one. So bear with me on that. I'm going to try to do it right. And I'll go over a few that I learned that I was doing wrong right now. First off, it's not Tolkien. Been saying Tolkien as long as I can remember. It's not Tolkien. It's Tolkien. Now, that came straight from the man himself. I found some writings. I think it was a letter, maybe to C.S. Lewis. I don't know. It was a letter to one of his contemporaries where he was sort of complaining and bemoaning the fact that everyone keeps calling him Tolkien, when he clearly, he says, states that his name is Tolkien, and he writes it out in all caps, K-E-E-N, in this letter. So that's pretty definitive. It's Tolkien. It still sounds weird to me because I'm used to saying Tolkien, but it is Tolkien. And the dragon is not Smaug, it's Smaug. And it's not Gandalf, it's Gandalf. Did you catch the difference? Apparently, in Tolkien's language, I see I did it myself, in Tolkien's languages, if a name, if a name ends in an F, it's pronounced with a V sound. So it's Gandalf, not Gandalf. It's not Aragorn, it's Aragorn. And it's not Faramir, it's Faramir. So, and there's probably a whole lot more that I'm getting wrong. And like I said, not just me, but some of the adaptations get it wrong. And, it's... And really, there's not much excuse for it for people who say they've read all of the stuff. Because I understand at the end of Return of the King, which I'm not quite there yet, more on that later, there is a pronunciation guide. So there you go. So I'm going to start out by talking about my first exposure to The Hobbit, or any of Tolkien's works, was, believe it or not, I'm going to say it was either 1977 or 1978. I was in 4th or 5th grade at the time, so I was about 10 years old. And the school I went to at the time, and I went to a lot of different schools, but the one I was at that point, for some reason, which I have never really figured out why or how it came about, but they had I presume, a 16mm print of the first adaptation of The Hobbit, which was Rankin and Bass's TV movie, which came out in 1977 on television. And it was this right here. I have the DVD of it. And I'll put up a scan here so you can see this better. But I dearly love this. So one day at school, like I said, they hauled us all down to the auditorium. And they said they had a special thing they were going to do. They were going to show this movie. They didn't even tell us what it was. But they rolled it, and it was that movie. Now, I didn't first see it on TV. I first seen it at that school showing of that film. And I was blown away. You know, if you're not familiar with it, Rankin and Bass were some directors that did, they were a writer-director team. They did a whole bunch of TV specials. And if you haven't heard of them, I bet you're familiar with their work. Unless you're very young, you might not be. But they did just a bunch of holiday stuff that, you know, long before streaming and before cable, when you just had mainly the primary networks in the U.S., they would show Worldwide Santa Claus, Rudolph's Shiny New Year, Santa Claus Coming to Town. There's just a bunch of them that they did. And they would show these regularly every year. They would rerun these on TV. But that's what I'm familiar with Rankin and Bass from. And Rankin and Bass did this animated movie. Now, most of their holiday specials was like a stop motion deal. You know, sometimes it looked like claymation or, you know, figures that they would animate. Pretty cool stuff. If you haven't ever seen them, you should check them out. If you just Google Rankin and Bass, I'm sure it's probably available streaming somewhere, I would imagine. Surely. Should be on Disney, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I haven't checked into that. But so anyway, I seen that, and man, I was just completely blown away. It touched me in so many ways, and I will never forget it. I just loved it. It's full of great music. The folk singer Glenn Yarborough plays the balladeer, who sort of helps narrate the whole thing. Great cast. Orson Bean is Bilbo. Richard Boone is the voice of Smaug. John Huston is Gandalf. He does a fantastic job there. Really great artwork throughout it. Great animation. Lots of really nice music, and the poems are, you know, turned into songs quite often. It's great. Now, it's not perfect. None of the adaptations, in my opinion, have been perfect so far. Yeah, they really aren't. But this one, when I think of The Hobbit, I can't help but think back to this because it's my first exposure to it, you know, to any of the Tolkien universe stuff. And I really loved it. So like the next year, 1978, Ralph Bakshi had a theatrical film version of Lord of the Rings. Now, this movie was animated also, but it was done with rotoscoping, where they would actually, you know, shoot live actors and then sort of paint or draw over them. And it's got some problems. It doesn't always match. Sometimes a piece of the actor's shirt will not match up with the animation. It'll stick out, you know. It's not perfect either, but I remember seeing it. I didn't see it at the theater. I probably seen it on VHS, which was our version of streaming, you know, back then. So I probably saw it in like 1980 or something like that. But it was pretty ambitious for its time. It got a lot of stuff right. It got some stuff wrong. But as I was saying, it did only adapt the first two books, The Fellowship and The Two Towers. It didn't touch anything from Return of the King. And what I understand, the research I did, is Ralph Bakshi wanted to do this in two movies. He wanted to do he wanted this to be called Lord of the Rings Part 1, and then it was going to be Lord of the Rings Part 2. Well, the movie people were like, no, there's no way anyone will ever want to see a movie with Part 1 in the title. And I think they're kind of right, because I really can't think of a movie that's been released theatrically as a Part 1. I mean, if you guys can think of one, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure if you can think of one, put it down in the comments. I'll check it out. But I mean, there's plenty of Part 2s. But usually the first film is not called Part 1. It had a great cast. John Hurt was Aragorn. Anthony Daniels was Legolas. So that's kind of interesting. I have not seen it in probably 20, 30 years. So I don't know how well it holds up, if it holds up at all. But that's what happened. For whatever reason, I guess it wasn't successful enough. It was not. He never got to make his Part 2. And once Rankin and Bass, I guess, figured out that it was apparent it wasn't going to happen, he was never going to make one, they decided, well, we'll just do it. So they brought out their version of Return of the King. So they sought to finish what Ralph Bakshi started, put a scan of that here too, by telling the rest of the story. But they decided to do it in their own way, so they just brought back the whole crew, basically. Same kind of artwork, beautiful, just great music. They got Orson Bean to do the voice of Frodo this time. John Huston came back as Gandalf. Roddy McDowall is Samwise. That's pretty neat. Casey Kasem is Merry. Now, some of you young people may not know who Casey Kasem was, but he was American Top 40, the voice on that for many, many years throughout the 70s, the 80s, and some into the 90s there. He was also the original Shaggy on Scooby-Doo. He's that voice. The original Shaggy was Casey Kasem. So not too long after I seen that Hobbit movie for the first time, I deeply identified with that because, I was a picked on little kid. I've mentioned that before in some other videos. Some of you that's been here before, you know that. I was much shorter and smaller than, it was hard. School was hard, and I really identified with that Hobbit character, and ever since then, I've kind of looked at myself as a Hobbit. I mean, you may think me as more of a dwarf with the beard, but that's how I've always kind of self-identified as a Hobbit. Anyway, once I found out that was a book, that came from a book, I was like, I got to read that. And this version here is the first, I believe, is the first paperback I read of it. Now, oddly enough, this says 1983, so I don't know if that's right. I'm thinking maybe I might have checked it out of the library when I first read it, because I thought I read it long before 83. But at any rate, I have read this one several times. The Hobbit is one of the few books I've ever read more than once. Fahrenheit 451 would be another one. But I've read this 4 or 5 times. I think I just finished my 5th reading. Not in this volume, but I'll get to that later. I got a nice hardcover. But anyway, I think I read it for the 4th or 5th time last year. I just love it. I really, really love it. And this edition, for the longest time, I thought this cover was by the brothers Hildebrandt, this painting here, because it very much looks like their style. But doing research for this, I found out it is not. Now, interestingly, in the indicia of that paperback, it says that the cover art's by Tolkien. No, Tolkien is a good artist, but that is not Tolkien's work. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever seen an oil painting by Tolkien. He probably did some, but anyway, that cover is by Darrell K. Sweet, actually. Pretty nice stuff. And I think I probably found this at a yard sale somewhere, but this is an even older edition. This is the 1972 edition, actually the first edition in the U.S. market of The Hobbit in paperback format. And the cover art is really weird and really has nothing to do with the contents. The closest thing you could say is that related is there's maybe some hobbit holes in the side of this hill, maybe? I don't know. What do you think? But anyway, when I was trying to get the credit for this art, because I knew I was going to put a scan up, and I like to put the art credit when I do a scan. So I did some research trying to figure it out, because there's nothing to see here. Even when I scan it and I zoom in, in Photoshop, there's no signature. So I did a bunch of research, and I found a really funny story, odd story about that. Turns out this is by an artist named Barbara Remington, and she was primarily a paperback artist. When the publisher ordered that cover, they didn't give her any time to read the book, and she always would read the books before she would do the painting for the covers. And at that time, in 1972, it was hard to get a copy of The Hobbit in the U.S. market in any format. Just wasn't out there, and there were people trying to knock it off and put unauthorized editions out. So the publisher was really wanting to get this out quickly, an authorized book. So they said, well, just make something up. And they gave her this really rough outline of the book, a couple of sentences probably, and she tried to throw something together. And this is what she did. Now, my copy is of the first edition, but mine's like the 36th printing. In the really early copies of this, over here in this corner right here, there's a lion, a real goofy looking lion. And the speculation is that she had it kind of confused with some of C.S. Lewis's work, like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where there's a lion and, I don't know. But Tolkien did not like this cover at all. He hated it. And he had him remove the lion. He's like, there's no lions in this story anywhere, and there's no lions in the Shire, so get rid of the lion. So they painted green over that space there and got rid of the lion. He also didn't understand the tree in the foreground. I don't understand it either. Those big bulb things. When they asked the artist, she supposedly said it was supposed to evoke like a Christmas tree. Again, I guess she was confused with C.S. Lewis stuff. So, I don't know. It's a weird story. But apparently the ones with the golden lion in the corner of that art piece there are worth a good deal of money now. So, I don't know. So the first of the 3 Lord of the Rings movies by Peter Jackson were released in 2001. And then The Hobbit didn't come out until 2012. I've still got, let's see here, I've got a DVD of The Fellowship. I got that when the first movie was out and the others weren't. I'm going to open that all the way up, but there's DVDs and extras in here. I mean, I have the Blu-ray of this now, but I kept this just because the cover's so cool. You know, it looks like leather. It's not, but it's a nice case. I like the lettering on it. And then The Hobbit came out in 2012, and I got a Blu-ray of the first of those 3 movies. And I've got better editions of it now, but I kept this because the cover's pretty cool, the casing. And I did buy last year, I believe this came out in November of last year, this 31-disc Ultimate Collector's Edition. It's called the Middle-earth 31-disc Ultimate Collector's Edition. And I don't have it here with me because it's kind of big and it's a little fragile, but I'll run some B-roll right here. You can see what that looks like. You know, it flips out into different things, and you can choose which picture you want them all to form, depending on how you flip it around. And you know, I'm basically happy with it, but it's amazing that even though there's 31 discs here in this 4K Blu-ray set, there's still some material, some extras that aren't in there that were in previous Ultimate editions. So that is kind of annoying that it's still not all here. You buy this huge set, it's still not here, but I'm basically happy with it. I do wish it was made with plastic or metal instead of this paper and cardboard, because you know, I don't flip it around very much. I treat it like a shelf queen, and I just let it sit there on my shelf mostly. I flip it out to some scene, however I want to display it, and I just kind of leave it alone because I know it's not going to survive much of that. It's just going to tear apart. It's just paper and cardboard. So it's a little bit of a bummer. I wish it was a more sturdy edition, which there were some in the past, and I should have got those, and I never hopped on it, but yeah. So this is not too bad. You know, I'm not completely happy with Peter Jackson's, some of the decisions he made. I mean, I think his adaptation, especially the 3 Lord of the Rings movies, is certainly the closest to Tolkien, the most faithful that we've had so far. You know, I mean, that's not a super high bar, but, you know, it's the truth. I really don't like when he adds things or takes things away. I mean, I get that sometimes you need to take things away for space reasons. You know, you don't want to have this thing be 12 hours long, but why ever add anything? I really don't get that. I mean, if you're cutting material out, why put something back in? Just, yeah. So, but I'm basically happy with it. I am a big fan of his Lord of the Rings movies. They're pretty great. Now, his Hobbit, I got a lot more issues with. There's no way this thing needed to be 3 movies deep. Just didn't. And he added, you know, huge passages, huge amounts of material that are just nowhere to be found in the books, or in the book. To me, The Hobbit should have been a single epic 3-hour movie. I think you could have got it all in there. I really do. At 3 hours. But I mean, you know, it's a 300-page novel. You don't need to do 3 movies of this. But flawed as it is, I still really, really like it, and I still watch it every year. You know, so what are you going to do? One day, maybe we'll get a perfect adaptation. I don't know. But for now, this is the closest we're getting, I think. So people have asked me, are you watching Rings of Power, or are you going to? And I don't think I am. I think the answer to that for me is no. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I have no political axe to grind, and I don't care what these people's race or sexuality is. None of that has any bearing on why I'm not watching it. The reason I'm not watching it is I And this is weird. This is going to sound strange. You know, I'm a weird guy, but I just don't have any desire to see anyone add more content to Tolkien's universe. I think Tolkien wrote enough, and his son Christopher added some things, and that's cool because he worked with his father up until his father's death, and he worked from, you know, fragments that his father had. I think all that's fine, but I just don't see. It just feels wrong to me. I guess because I have such a personal connection to the Tolkien stuff that I don't want people adding new material to it. I don't like when Peter Jackson did it, and I certainly don't like what I've heard about. I mean, Amazon's just making stuff out of whole cloth. You know, they're just adding things that, I don't know, it just feels wrong to me. I mean, if you enjoy it, it's cool. I'm not one of those guys that's going to gatekeep on this, you know. But it's just not for me. I think there's enough Tolkien material that we don't need to just start adding more, you know. I mean, Tolkien has influenced almost all fantasy since his stuff came out. I mean, you know, we probably would have never had Dungeons and Dragons, you know, the original RPG, without Tolkien's work. And it just goes on and on and on. It's influenced so much, and I don't mind inspiration. Inspiration's great. I mean, you know, probably he's inspired a lot of the stuff I've got here, you know, and that's cool. But I just don't have any desire to see anyone add whole cloth original material and try to shoehorn it into the Tolkien universe. It's just not for me. Now I'm going to tell you some stuff that sounds a little unrelated, but bear with me. February 11th in 2000, I joined the Ars Technica forums. ArsTechnica.com is a tech news website. It's still there now. And I joined their forums with the handle of Web Hobbit. Capital W, capital H, but one word, Web Hobbit. I posted a lot there for many, many years. I still have an active account there now. I occasionally will drop in, you know, but I don't spend a lot of time there now. For one thing, I'm not as involved with IT related stuff as I was. And I'm busy with other things like YouTube, you know, so. But you know, over the time I joined in 2000 to now, I've got 9,547 posts. So, you know, I was pretty heavy into it for a long time. For a long time, I did some IT work on the side. You know, it's pretty small time, mostly with local people. Most of it was just consumer level stuff, you know, removing malware, you know, formatting a hard drive, reinstalling an OS, that kind of thing. You know, maybe upgrading a graphics card here and there, that sort of thing. Strictly small time. But I was making a little money. Anyway, so later that same year, in 2000, I registered the domain webhobbit.net, and I used that for my personal blog and for my email. Now, in 2003, a few years after that, I registered webhobbit.com. And at first, I just mirrored my own blog. So if you went to webhobbit.net or webhobbit.com, it would flip to the same material, which was basically just a personal blog I had. So I was still doing the IT work on the side some, and by 2005, I began using that .com address for my side business. You know, I was still doing the same kind of deal, and I did a little bit of web design on the side. I used to know cascading style sheets and some of that stuff. So a couple of small businesses had me doing their websites for them and different stuff like that. Like I said, strictly small time. I mean, at the height of my deal, when I was doing that kind of work on the side, I was probably making maybe $3,000 a year at the most. You know, pretty small time. So 2007, I get this letter from some high-powered law firm out of California. Still got it. Kept it after all these years. They sent it to me FedEx. But it's from the Saul Zaentz. These are people representing Saul Zaentz. Now, if you've probably heard that name, you may not know who it is, but Saul Zaentz, at least in my mind, he was a movie producer, but among other things. But in my mind, I most think of him, identify him with the John Fogerty lawsuit. Now, if you aren't familiar with that, Google John Fogerty Fantasy Records lawsuit, or even John Fogerty Saul Zaentz. It should come right up, and you can check that out. I'm just going to read a little bit about Saul Zaentz from the Wikipedia page with my phone. Or actually with my wife's phone, because I'm shooting this video on my phone. So if you go to Wikipedia and you search up Saul Zaentz. You'll get his entry here, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. And here we go. In 2011, Zaentz Company began several legal actions against small businesses in the UK to enforce their Hobbit trademark, including the Hungry Hobbit Cafe, Sarehole, Birmingham, and a pub in Southampton, England, which had traded as the Hobbit for 20 years. This raised the ire of many British correspondents, such as Stephen Fry, who described it as pointless, self-defeated bullying. I thought that was neat and a little bit telling of who we're dealing with here when I go into the rest of this. So I'm just going to read some from this this letter, and I think I can put up scans of it because, I mean, this is my story, this is my property, it happened to me, but I'm not wanting to dox these people or anything, you know, so please don't harass them on my behalf. I'm gonna redact their address and phone number a little bit, but it wouldn't be hard to find them. I mean, you know, I'm gonna leave in their web address. Hey, you know, I think I'm on pretty solid legal ground to show this, but like I said, please don't harass them on behalf of me. You know, just leave them alone. This happened a while back, but I think it's important to get this in this video. And I'll put up scans of it, and I'm going to read a little bit from it. But it says, we represent the Saul Zaentz Company, DBA, Tolkien, doing business as Tolkien Enterprises, or SZC of Berkeley, California. I remember this is in 2007. In connection with intellectual property matters. As you may know, SCC, is the holder of various exclusive worldwide motion picture, stage, merchandising, and other rights relating to certain literary works of J.R.R. Tolkien, including the trilogy known as The Lord of the Rings. And it mentions the books and all that stuff. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but much of it I'll put on the screen here if you want to read it. If you can, you might have to zoom in, depending on how big a screen you're looking at. But I'm going to read this paragraph here. We recently learned of the existence of your computer repair and website design business, webhobbit.com. Your business, through your website operating at the webhobbit.com domain name, your website, for which you are listed as the registrant and administrative contact. Your business and website have not been authorized by SCC, nor, as we understand it, by the estate of J.R.R. Tolkien. This goes on. I got to read it all, like I said, but I'll get to the punchline here, the gut punchline. Your unauthorized use of the Hobbit mark in connection with commercial goods and services would be irreparably damaging the SZC and its current licensees. The use of Hobbit in your business and on your website undeniably brings to mind the Tolkien works and SCC's film and stage adaptations, and trades upon the substantial goodwill created by SCC. Such use likely will cause confusion, cause mistakes, or deceive the consuming public as to the source, sponsorship, association, or affiliation of your business and website in violation of our clients' rights under the Lanham Act. Even assuming arguendo that your use of Hobbit would not cause confusion, your use without authorization would dilute the value of the Tolkien marks, which are undoubtedly famous. SCC understands that your use of the Hobbit mark in connection with your business and website may be based on appreciation of the Tolkien works, and that you may have proceeded without full knowledge of the law in this area. Therefore, our client would prefer to resolve this matter amicably and without the need for any legal proceedings. In order to do so, we request that you cease all use or planned use of the Hobbit mark in connection with commercial goods or services, including your business and website. So yeah, that happened, and I was not happy about this at all. In retrospect, many people have told me I probably could have won if I'd fought this, you know, but I would have had to spend a lot of money to hire a lawyer, and I guess I would have probably had to go to California to fight it, which that would have entailed even more money. I mean, because Web Hobbit is not the same thing as Hobbit or The Hobbit. I mean, it's a different thing. I don't know. I mean, I didn't use any Tolkien artwork at all, no graphics on my site or anything like that. It was just a name. It was a handle I used online. People knew me as that. They called me WH for years. You know, it's a bummer. you know, and it really hit me hard, and it sucked. And I did negotiate a little bit, and I got them to pay me like $200 for the 2 domains before I turned it over to them. And it's still tied up with them now. If you type in webhobbit.net or webhobbit.com, it will just flip over to middleearth.com. Even though Zaentz doesn't hold the rights to it anymore, all that transferred ownership when Embracer, I believe it was Embracer Inc., took it over recently. So I know it's it's a weird thing to happen, but it happened. So I guess I'm in good company in some ways. The same people that went after John Fogerty went after me. So there you go. So some of the other stuff I got is I got this cool letter opener size replica of Sting. I'll show some B-roll of that. It's pretty neat. It's really sharp. I also have the One Ring. I think this came with my Hobbit DVD, Blu-ray rather. Not sure, but it's pretty cool. Didn't come with the strap. I added that. Yeah, I like it. Now, last year for my birthday, my wife got me this, and this is probably the greatest gift I've ever received. Well, with the exception of my daughter, Kristen. I will add that. But after Kristen, this is probably the greatest gift I've ever received. I just love it so much. This is United Cutlery's replica of Sting from the Peter Jackson movies. And I think it's a pretty good scale version, I believe. There's no edge on it, but it is nice, beautiful stainless steel. As you can see, got quite a point on it. You could hurt yourself with the point, but there's no edge here. But yeah, it's just beautiful. I love it so much. I could just handle it all day until I probably fumbled it and hurt myself, probably. But yeah, man, it's just perfect. Yeah. Yeah, it's treasure for sure. This is my precious, is what this is right here. You know. So if I don't put it away now, I will never get through this video. So, but yeah, you can hang it on the wall with the wall plaque, either this way or just bare. I usually hang it bare because I like to see the cool runes and the beautiful blade. Yeah, oddly enough, I've read The Hobbit many, many times, and I read The Fellowship, the first book of Lord of the Rings, in high school. And I started reading the second book, and I didn't get very far, and it just seemed like a slog to me. I just couldn't get through it. I was reading like Michael Moorcock's Elric saga, and I was probably still finishing up the Conan saga, Robert E. Howard stuff. I was reading all that, and I was just blazing through that stuff. But for some reason, that second book of Lord of the Rings, just couldn't do it, and I set it aside, and for many, many years, I never went back to it. I know it sounds crazy, big Tolkien fan like me, and I never finished Lord of the Rings. I believe last year, I decided I was gonna fix that. I'm gonna finish it. So I went ahead and bought some really nice hardcover sets. I don't have it with me here, but I'll show some B-roll of the set that I got last year. And at the time, it was a UK exclusive. You could not buy it here in America. But I learned that you can take your Amazon US account, and you can log into Amazon UK, and you can buy stuff. Didn't know that, but I found out. And that's where I got these. It's illustrated by Alan Lee. Beautiful watercolors and drawings in here. Just gorgeous stuff. He did all the covers too. Run scans of those. But it's all 4 books. It's The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, all 3 volumes in a hardcover and in this nice slipcase box set, rather. Nice. And that's where I'm finishing Lord of the Rings now. I'm actually on the 3rd book at this time, finishing up Return of the King. I guess it took getting old, for me to appreciate the pacing and the writing style of Lord of the Rings, of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. It's very different than The Hobbit. The Hobbit, he originally wrote as a children's tale, I guess. And I think it holds up for any age, myself. But it is much lighter than the stuff in Lord of the Rings. It's much darker toned, and it's slower paced. So you got to be patient to get through it. But man, I love it. I'm really loving it this time. Didn't have any problem getting through it as a 54-year-old web hobbit. Oh, I can't call myself that anymore. Larry. 54-year-old Larry. Yeah, I'm not in love with that name, but hey, it's the one I got, and I can't get sued over that one. So there you go. I also picked up, this was another UK exclusive when I ordered it. I think there is a version of it out now, and I'll run a little B-roll of this. For some reason, the B-roll I shot doesn't show the full red of this thing. It's blaze red. I'm not sure why. I tried to edit it to punch up the red, and it still didn't come out. So I'm going to try to show it here. We'll see how red it shows on here. I'll use the B-roll anyway, but it's really cool. This is Lord of the Rings in a deluxe hardcover in this slipcase. And it's all in one volume. Now, as I understand it, isn't that beautiful? Nice ribbon. Gold foil, sides. Man, it's gorgeous. And this one is illustrated by Tolkien. Anyway, as I understand it, Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings originally as one book. And even in those Alan Lee illustrated hardcovers I have, it's numbered consecutively. Not with The Hobbit. It's its own numbering. But then the 3 books are numbered together. So like Fellowship starts out page 1, and then it goes to like page, I don't know, it's probably going to be over 1,000. But, when you start the second book, it doesn't start with page 1. It picks up from the last one. Now, this big red deluxe I have here is just all 3 volumes straight through, but without The Hobbit. So I don't know. I'm actually thinking about trying the Silmarillion. Now, is it Silmarillion or is it Silmarillion? Not sure. I guess I need to find out on that. But there is a beautiful deluxe of that coming out soon, and I'll show a little picture of that. And thinking it's up for pre-order now. I think it's coming out next month. I might get that too. I don't know. So that's all I got. A little bit about my love for Tolkien and The Hobbit and why I identify with The Hobbit so much. Just, I can't call myself Web Hobbit anymore. I still use it as my email handle, so whatever. Anyway, that's all I got this week. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed making it. And, yeah, do you like Tolkien? Do you love Lord of the Rings like I do? Let me know in the comments what you think of all this. And I'll see you in the next one.